We have returned in the second half of the first class on Reincarnation, Rebirth, and the illusion of death, which we're kind of leaving as a special teaching for a different facet of this diamond. But we have returned, but we hope you won't, not in ignorance. Not only to this class, but to this body. The Lord Buddha said in the Dhammapada, and it flashed in my mind the other day when I looked in the mirror at myself, said, and it was, I was getting ready for the class and everything, and I remember right from the Dhammapada, it's like Buddha spoke to me and said, wear this body for the last time. So I said, well, okay. And it certainly is a seed that's been planted in my mind for 50 years now. And I have been thinking of the formless. I also have my ideal in form with Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna and the mantra to them. So, and the Dharma has come along in no uncertain terms, in droves, like these 350 charts now that I have, or 335, I think, charts on the Dharma that I've put forth. Most of them in the Indian darshanas and a couple of them around other religions. But anyway, we hope that we will wear this body for the last time in ignorance, because ignorance is not bliss. Bliss is something completely transcendental, with a capital B, and again, there's no other word for it in any other language but Sanskrit than Ananda. I often say that thousands and thousands of monks today have the last name of Ananda. So they've given up the world and taken on this be thee as thy Father in heaven is perfect kind of perspective. I will be bliss. I will be bliss that's unalloyed and uninterrupted. And that's, you can't say that about any other evolute of bliss. Say happiness, contentedness, joy. They all have their flaws, we find. Unless they are somehow aligned with bliss. And you just can't bear the bliss, so you have to come down to joy, usually. Something like that. So anyway, to wear this body for the last time is sort of the purpose of remembering how many times you've been reborn. I think one of my favorite teachings that I use that has been most effective to give people some sort of encouragement and anticipation towards this is the saying that you've witnessed your death many times, and your birth too. I had an experience in the crib where I heard the word Om. I must have just come from there and sort of saw a cycle that I came out into the fetus, into the body of the baby. So it sort of felt like I had come down that, and the word was behind it all. And I remember crying because it scared me in the body. My mother coming in and opening the door. Even the sound of the door brushing against the rug, which was the door hadn't been shaven for the carpet. So that's just one experience in my earliest infant. So it sort of supports this idea that you've seen yourself be born, you've seen yourself die many times, and if that's true, then you must have seen it from an eternal life that you live. Eternal life is not something that you get, you see. We call that word moksha. You have it all the time. That is you, eternal life. It's not something like Christ would explain to the fisherman, you need eternal life. You have a relative life, a life of fishes and loaves and nets, and but now come with me and I'll give you eternal life. So he meant really, I'll remind you that you are eternal, because you can't get liberated. It's not possible when the Atman, again, what word shall we use in English or Aramaic or Greek or for the soul? Soul with a capital S. So we want this Atman, as we use our Buddha nature, if you prefer, the indivisible self, the great self, that's eternal, and that you are. That thou art is Tattvamasi, is one of the great sayings. In fact, Svajitaya Vritti Pravaho actually lines up with the four Mahavakyas. That's, if they want to explain that word, they'll align it with the four Vakyas, like Tattvamasi, that thou art. One of the four great sayings in the scriptures of India. Upanishada. So, so moksha is a thing that's always at hand. It's not something that you gain via evolution, not even via practice, not by taking a guru and touching his feet, not by destroying the impurities in your mind. You cannot gain liberation. It's already yours. That is your true nature. So how have I dreamed myself away from it? How many things have I put in the way of it? You know, my own samskaras based on karmas that turned into sankalpas, that threw me into maya, that made me believe in false superimpositions, that then left me ignorant. It's classic here, the way Lord Vashishta is teaching the young 14-year-old Sri Ramchandra, and how later on Ramchandra was born again as Sri Krishna. I mean, there's another beautiful song that they sing about Sri Krishna in that regard. Om Jnana Timirannasya Jana Jnana Sakalaya Chakshurunmilitang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Guru Pada Kamala Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha. And other verses like that. Basically, praises Lord, talking to Sri Krishna. Praises, O Lord, never-ending praises be unto ye, O adorable one. Thou who takest the devotees from earth to the highest realm of existence, through this sunlit path, you'd say. You have opened my eyes, Jnana Jana Sakalaya, the eye of wisdom. You've opened my eye and cleared my perception of doubts and imperfections. Therefore to thee, O beloved, I offer all that I am. Vandeham, I worship you, aham. So these are just among so many of the Ram bhajans and Krishna bhajans that are so many in India. You can learn so many of them. I learned many of them myself from the monks and the brahmacharyas in India, but didn't even, come close to being able to learn all that was there. So from time out of mind, they've been offering these songs to the archetypical soul, to the Supreme Lord in human form. So they've had a real long love affair with God with form. Yet this formless reality which Ram and Krishna both talk about in the scriptures that are attributed to him, the stories about them, is that, as Krishna says, the string running through the pearls of all of that. So we have Sri Ramakrishna as the best expression of that. Do you believe in God with form or without form? He'd ask people that, who are his devotees or his future devotees. And one would say, I believe the formless God. Very good, he'd say, but don't feel like that's the only way. You should never feel limited like that. And he'd ask someone else, what do you believe in? Oh, God with form, for sure. So that's very good, but don't believe that that's the only way. So he'd always bring people to a higher station and open up all the channels, let them let them have both God with form and beyond form. That's saguna with form and nirguna beyond form. And that's where I want to go soon here with the gunas. I want to give you a rendering of the gunas in terms of how they affect rebirth and reincarnation. But first, let's go here and look at what happened to poor Sukra. Hard to call him poor when he was born as the son of Rishi Brigu. You mention Brigu amongst the rishis, they just salute, because one of the highest knowers of Brahman. And actually, when Brigu found out that his son had been subject to death, he went to death and said, I'll destroy you if you don't bring my son back. And death brought him back. So even death is afraid of Brigu. So it's a very wonderful philosophical statement too. Rebirth, reincarnation, and the illusion of death. There's a song in India that says, I've received a command from Divine Mother that death must die. So this idea that I die, it must go, and that's why I just said, because you've witnessed all your deaths. And you feared them, so you fear it still. When you don't fear it anymore, like the Tibetans are teaching, and you can go into it, give up your breath, take your last breath, or do it consciously, then you won't fear death anymore. And death then will be an illusion for you. And you'll have to try and convince others of the same thing. Hopefully in your family first. And get a spiritual family for that. So that's jumping ahead a little in the story, but you see, just like here in the Purastika body chart, the very highest is Parabrahma, or Atman. We'll call Brahma over here. That's got to be the formless reality that shoots through everything like sweetness shoots through sugarcane juice. That's actually a very good story to use here in Hawaii, isn't it? But that was one of Sri Ramakrishna's stories, metaphors about Brahman. It's in everything, like sweetness is in sugarcane juice. So but it's not the thing itself, it's the backdrop, it's the essence. And you couldn't even say it's within everything and be entirely accurate. So you'd have to be very careful with it philosophically. So if you came out, so here's Lord of Death hanging there as a possibility. The other side is Brigu in Nirvikalpa. So Brigu and his son have taken bodies. They've sat down in this story by Lord Vasishta, the story of Sukra. They sat down, let's enter into deep meditation together. They both went into deep meditation, and time is swallowed up. Hundreds of years can pass, and they can still sit there. Because time is just Rip Van Winkled, in that case. It's the only kind of Western way we have of thinking of it, that, thousands of years become a second, really. So time is that illusory, just like death is. So they enter into this meditation together, sitting side by side, and they go into deep samadhi. Brigu stays in deep samadhi, but Sukra gets attracted to Visvachi, who's this goddess, who's in Indra's realm. I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, those two possibilities, his father's sitting next to him, the great Rishi, in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, all form is gone. He's in the highest state. And you could say that Atmic Sankalpa, which is over here again, you see in this other chart, basically is what Sukra now considers. See, I think maybe I'll come out of Nirvikalpa. It's done. You see, it's okay. But when he did it, he got disoriented. So how did that happen? The mind and its powers of sankalpic projection. When he saw the mind, that's why I showed you this first, how mind contemplates its own realms, you see, all the dualities. He saw all the worlds when he entered into sankalpa, which you could do too if you had left the body. And you saw, like the Tibetans are talking about, the different bardos in the different realms, lokas, akashas, Shaivites call it spandas, vibrating spheres, all inside of your mind. The kingdoms of heaven is what those are. So you saw them from just like the same place you saw your death and birth from. So you're a free soul and you're seeing that. And in one of these realms, you practice sankalpic projection, birth of Sukra, son of Brigu. This is where he gets born in a subtle body. Or a causal body, you could even say. Maybe he hasn't even reached the subtle body yet. But whatever the case may be, from that subtle body, he seeks heaven and sports with the goddess Vishvachi in Indraloka. So Indra is ready, waiting, and this great kingdom of heaven called Indraloka. He presides over all the senses, all the gods of all the senses. Everything from Indra's realm all the way down to earth is under Indra's control. The only thing beyond Indra is the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are greater than he. And they invest him with powers so that he can oversee all of this. It's a fixed position. See, it's like hundreds and thousands and billions of years will have to pass before Indra goes back to Brahman and gives his seat up to another Indra. See, that's how they explain it. Same with the Trinity. These are souls that are extremely qualified to oversee all the realms of name and form and time and space, from the great mind all the way out to earth. And with their own little cabinets, just like a president has a cabinet. See, they have subtle sub-powers that they pass things on to. So you can see that when he is born outside of his own state of non-duality, and he sees that he could project himself somewhere, and he espies the heavens, and he sees Vishvachi, and he gets very attracted to her, and he asks Indra, giving you some of the details of the story, because this pretty much makes it very sparse. He goes to Indra and says, I would like to enter Indraloka, and I want to meet Vishvachi and court her, as it were. Hundreds and thousands of years go on while they court, see, in Indraloka. Meanwhile, Brigu is still sitting in Samadhi, in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I'll leave that for later, but eventually he comes out, sees his son's body sitting next to him, and it's beginning to decay. So he goes to death and says, you took my son. You cannot take my son. You bring him back, or I will destroy you. Yama, so please don't do that. There's a whole dialogue between the Lord of Death and Brigu about how afraid Yama gets when Brigu comes to him like that. And there are other aspects of the story that are very beautiful. You can read it for yourself in Yoga Vashishta. But one of the things that transpires, because I tell you now because it's not on the chart, is that in this well, it is on the chart. Maybe I'll save it, because when he's finally born as an illumined soul on earth, when he goes through all these lifetimes and gets born, then Brigu and Yama make a plan that they can get his soul back in the physical body where he's sitting and bring him back. And so they have to rub his body and get the blood flowing again and the prana flowing through the nerves, and finally he comes out and his body embraces his father, and they go take a sacred bath in the river. And this is the way the story proceeds, but all with these beautiful philosophical implications about death being an inferior power in the whole scheme of things. Thus the title, or the wordage, The Illusion of Death. Death is just transitioning souls from one place to another. He's your friend. He's always been thought of in that way in India. If you've got an old body, take it, you know. Transmute me into another form, into another world. So it's the power by which this gets done. It's called Yama. That's so jumping ahead, so because I'll probably not include that when I get to the end of this chart, but you can see here what this sporting with Vishvachi happened to him. He falls from Indraloka via sankalpic projection, his own powers. He falls from Indraloka. So he sported with Vishvachi long enough. They say goodbye to each other. They pledge each other their eternal divine love forever, for all time. They part, and he tries to make his way back to his father, and he gets disoriented. How does that happen to a great soul like Shukra? His mind broods on the moon's rays. Basically, I'm putting this in very few words because on an 8x11 you'll have to forgive me, but basically the story is that if he's aware of all the heavens, he's also aware of the earth, because earth is a very beautiful place, especially long back there before it was polluted. So he comes upon in his mind, this is all happening in the mind, remember this, and it's not an actual thing, it's a big dream that everyone's having, see. Because Brahman doesn't dream, Vivekananda says. And Brahman's not subject to Maya. So this all has to happen in the mind. From the great mind to the collective mind to the individual mind, we've studied all that before. So he is, again, as he leaves Indraloka, he gets a little disoriented and his eyes fall on Bur Loka. He sees all the lokas. Bur is the lowest loka of physical beauty. And he sees this beautiful moonlit night. This is very beautiful. I'll try and add these comments in. And he enters as prana into snow. So it's a winter in that particular country, in that village, on that farm, where he sees the moon's rays falling on that farmland. See, and so he broods on that. Remember, mind broods on its own dualities. So he broods on that, and he fashions, in sankalpic form, this dream, and so he is so enamored by this snow falling on this moonlight that he identifies with it, which is what happens when we identify with our parents before we die. And so he identifies with snow as prana falls onto the ground. Then it falls onto a paddy field, that is a rice field of a farmer. This farmer happens to, let's go on. He falls onto the paddy field and nourishes rice and becomes food. Now, this is where we segue quickly, but we're not going to yet, to this chart about Brahman is food. Here on this earth, all is food. So if this sounds a little far-fetched to our Western understanding of how things come about, then we're going to have to see how all of everything in this world is Brahman. It's also food for everyone on all different levels. Like you're reading a scripture, that's food for your mind. But all is food. It's one of the great mantras in India. So we'll get to that. So he falls onto the paddy field, nourishes rice as snow via prana that he's fallen, and becomes the food. So he becomes the rice. Then that rice is eaten by a Brahmin priest that was grown on that paddy field, you see. So he takes it, and that food gets converted into sperm and given to the Brahmin priest's wife. And therefore, verily in this world, all is food, you see, is the mantra in the Vedas. Where is it? Right here. So, of course, then, born from food, he's born in the ovum as a fetus and develops and takes lifetimes. Birth as Sukra, as a priest's son, happens next. Then he performs tapas for 1 manvantara. That's a huge long amount of time, for many lifetimes. To give you some sort of an idea, 1 yuga is like 246,000 years, and the next yuga is twice that, and the next yuga is 4 times that, and the next yuga is 8 times that. So that's called 1 mahayuga, and there are some 12 or 16 mahayugas in a manvantara. So talk about the illusoriness of death and time. There's just nothing but consciousness out there. It's just really a matter of whether it dreams or not. I mean, if you want to put it that simply. It can play in the fields of the Lord or not. However, if it plays in the fields of the Lord, then you've got these other considerations. It can play there, develop karmas and samskaras, fall into ignorance, and then be born again and again in the worlds of suffering. Or it can take one birth, return to its essence again, and say, I've been there, done that. See? Or it can come back and help others once it's realized its true nature. I mean, basically, there are some couple fine choices there, and then a couple don't go there kind of choices. You don't want to do that. Believe me, you don't want to do that. Don't try telling your children that, right? So anyway, he performs tapas for a manvantara. He's not just living a worthless life or a series of worthless lives. He's actually doing austerities. And he marries and has offspring and becomes enslaved to the world via that. So he's a Brahmin priest's son, so that means he's a Brahmin priest usually himself, you see, in his rebirths. And so they have to earn a living, you see, by various means, hopefully in good ways, dharmically speaking. Well, then a series of lifetimes ensues. This is getting finer and finer print that you probably can't see, but I will give it to you here. A series of lifetimes ensues. First as a fragrance, then as a cluster of bamboo, then as a swan, then as a boa constrictor that probably eats the swan, then as the hunter, then as a stag. So he has to pay karma for killing animals. Then as a chieftain of a hill tribe, then as a ruling king, then as a king of the Vidyadharas. That's a pretty high lifetime. Vidyadhara means holder of wisdom. So there are tribes in India or sects in India that hold the ancient wisdom for their particular lineage for lifetimes. That would be a great birth to be born as a king of the Vidyadharas. Then king of a solar line. That's even better. You're someone like Lord Brahma's sons. So like Vasishta himself. He visited his own solar line in meditation all the way up to the sun god and talked with them in meditation, much like Brigu's sitting in meditation. So he's the king of that solar line. Then he becomes the guru of a solar race. Then he becomes the son of a Muni. Then the guru of the Shaivites. That's the worshippers of Shiva. And finally he's born as Vasudeva, son of the great Rishi, which is pretty much the same status as being Sukra, the son of Brigu. And at that point then, the long-waiting, patient king of death and great Rishi Brigu have been waiting for that, and they bring him back into the body and wake him up, and then son and father unite. This is a typical story of the Itihasa in India. Although this appears in Lord Vasishta, you have these stories inside of stories that just go over sweeps of time that are unimaginable and seemingly far-fetched to some of our Western sensibilities and understandings, nonetheless are very fascinating and begin to awaken in us this idea that maybe we've lived hundreds and thousands of lifetimes. Now, my teaching around that recently to explain it is that if you believe in evolution, this can't be possible, because you only appeared in this 4,320 year stretch of time as an upright, two-legged being, only recently. And you've only been upright for a few thousand years, as it were. So you couldn't really have lived many lifetimes in that period. And what happened to you before all of that? Were you really a paramecium and climbed out as a salamander and a eukaryote and so forth? Were you really that whole line of beings, or were you just dreaming that? Like Brigu's dreaming all this, you see. And a dream can just go away in a few instants. I mean, if you passed right now, you'd forget all this, and you'd be born again, and you wouldn't remember any of this, as if no time passed. So that's why in deep sleep there's no time for you last night. So how can time be real when it went away? And if you died in deep sleep, you would never remember this lifetime unless you had qualified yourself to remember it or had a teacher to awaken it. So, you analyze philosophically like this, like the rishis did, and you just, there's Maya, name, form, time, space, and karma. And it's all unreal, see. And so they start building up not only philosophies about this, but sadhana around the philosophy, in which to annul karmas that have come by being misdirected, like Sukra got misdirected here, and recovered himself. Lord Vashishta said in that story along the way to Arjuna, to Sukra, he said, just as a stone may have, to Ram, just as a stone may have many figures carved in it, so too, in the one Brahman, all worlds and lives manifest themselves. Sometimes you have that idea of a soap stone and you carve things in it, or some Japanese artist will take a big piece of bamboo wood or something, and beautiful wood, and carve all these, whole worlds in it, and you're just fascinated by it. Just like that, Lord Vashishta said, are all worlds contained into one Brahman, like carvings on its face. And all these lifetimes take place in that. And then, that stone or that soapstone or that piece of wood can just be obliterated at some time, as if nothing ever existed, back to the formless essence, back to Brahman. Brahman is at the head of both of these charts. There, that was a fun story time, wasn't it? Now, quickly, and this is where we will proceed more swiftly through some of these charts, let's take a little look at food. So we know in our own tradition, in chapter 4, sloka 24, I think it is, that 424, that we have our famous food blessing in Vedanta. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaivatena, Gantabhyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. Those who burn their karmas will enter into their highest state of samadhi. So I put it into a chart and helpfully put the koshas there up the middle. So you have your physical kosha called your body. Remember, that was deha, right? That's your physical body. And then you have your pranamaya kosha, energy. Brahman is energy. Manamaya kosha, Brahman is thought. Vijnanamaya kosha, Brahman as intelligence. And finally, Anandamaya kosha, Brahman as bliss. So these are connections that you could make to show how all of this, is based in food, especially from the standpoint of a physical world. Which is why then the tradition is very careful about saying this over food, because there are different kinds of defects in food that won't get removed by prayer and won't get removed just by organics. You see, like people believe nowadays. You'll have to get rid of these defects that cause karma, that are vibrations in the food, like somebody touched it who was evil or confused or wanted to make money off it, and it got tainted with the thought of the person who touched it. Like the people going to market with that rice that Sukra ate, Basically, what was their thought? Who touched it? How did it arrive there? What did the guy at the market, did he cheat them? Did he resell the rice for too much money? Was he a dishonest merchant? Not a true Vaishya? He was adharmic. Then all of this got tainted the food, and so that people eat it, they get a general overall karma from it. So this is beginning to explain how food is in everything, how everything is food. Your body will become food for insects or for fire or for animals. Whatever the case may be, it'll get devoured. And so at the physical level, we see how true that is. Now, if you devoutly offer the food, Om Brahmarpanam, arpana, if you offer it. And then Brahmahavi is, and it's sanctified it is also the sanctified article given as the oblation. So you offer the food in knowledge that the giving of the food is an oblation to the fire god, basically, in that case. And then Brahmagna, you place it into the fire of Brahman. So it's not just physical fire that you're putting physical food in, as if you were a priest that didn't know anything, and you're just going through the motions. This has to be a conscious offering for the food to be blessed, so that it will purify all levels. And then Brahmanahutam, it is placed into the fire of Brahman by Brahman. So here's where, if you really want your food sanctified, you have to consider that you are the force that is offering the food. That's you. You're Brahman. And in order to have the karma removed that you're not Brahman, this is going to be very helpful. So the food that you're taking in is going to purify the nadis. There's all sorts of teachings around what food can do for you, if you say mantra over it, and if you use the energy to do tapas. But there are also a lot of little gaps in the understanding of this ancient system of blessing food that come forward when you look at it through a story like this. You see how his eyes became impure and looked upon the earth. First they wanted to sport with the goddess, then he wanted to look upon earth. He got trapped as food, became sperm given to the ovum, became a fetus again, and started the whole process again. And he was a realized soul. He was the son of a great rishi. Lucky he had Brigu looking out for him, to go up and face off with death. So it's offered into the fire of Brahman by Brahman alone, Brahmanahutam. Then Brahma eva, the one Brahman, tena gantavyam. The one Brahman can be reached by Brahma karma samadhina, only by those absorbed in action as Brahman. So all of this is done as one offering, and you will then purify all the koshas. Your food will become Brahman, your energy Brahman, your thought Brahman, your intelligence Brahman, and your bliss is also in Brahman. Now the quotes here might bring another level of understanding to it. The Taittiriya Upanishad says this: from Atman, ether emerged. From ether, air. From air, fire. From fire, water. From water, earth. From the earth, herbs came. And from herbs, food. From food came the body. He indeed is the person consisting of the essence of food. So, if you've studied the Prastika body, then you know what I just said about the Indriyas containing the 5 elements in it, and the Deha also being a part of that 10-fold or 15-fold tattvic package of the cosmic mind. It goes on, that is what the Taittiriya Upanishad, about a story about Brigu. The celebrated Rishi Brigu approached his father Varuna. So now we're talking about Sukra was Brigu's father, but Brigu's son, but Brigu's was the son of this other Rishi named Varuna, or this god named Varuna. And he requested him, "Revered sir, instruct me about Brahman." As a means to the knowledge of Brahman, Varuna taught him about food. Then he taught him about the vital airs, that's prana, sight, hearing, and speech. Those are 3 of the 5 senses. Brigu then understood food. For all beings here are born from food. Having been born from food, they remain alive by food. Upon departing the body, they enter into food. Having reflected on the nature of food, Brigu then asked Varuna, "Revered sir, now instruct me about Brahman." As if Varuna knew, you'll never know about Brahman till you know about food. And so, in all these ways, inwards and outwards, that Sukra fell, he became food for others. That's how the rebirth, reincarnation process occurs, is through food. Everyone's eating it. The gods are eating soma and this nectar, and on down the ancestors are eating equivalents of food that are very delicious, like heavenly delights, but they're not physical, you see. And on down the scope to where you get earthlings or human beings living on earth have this whole variety of foods and this whole culinary art around it, and how to blend them and how to name them and how to mix them and how to spice them. And the whole thing is Brahman as food. So it's very well thought and very convincing and very powerfully put forth that this has to be a realization that you have. And so therefore Holy Mother saying in our day and age, when she said back in the early 1900s to her, to all of us, to her students, that anything you take you have to bless. Don't put anything in your mouth without blessing it first with the mantra. Because pure mind will turn into pure blood. Pure blood will turn into pure thought. Pure thought will turn into pure mind. And pure mind is Brahman. So she just pretty much corroborates what the Taittiriya Upanishad said, and what is taught by Lord Vashishta to Sri Ram, and what Krishna speaks about when he talks about the parastika body. It's all coming out and ending up in food and returning to food at all different levels. So this really is not a sidetrack, but it is an avenue to go along when you're trying to teach something as interesting, you might say, as Sukra's fall from grace, and what actually happened to him at the lower states. I mean, if you don't know anything about the higher states of yourself, Atman, Brahman, you don't even know that your mind has created all the worlds and it's yours, all the worlds are yours, God had nothing to do with it. You don't know any of that, then it's not so hard to speculate about it. But when it gets here, it gets so specific as that you can live a lifetime as a swan, you see, or a passing fragrance on a breeze. And that food was at the foundation of all this. Then you'll have to approach it like Krishna does in the Gita, you see in the 4th chapter, and why this is said by millions of people around the world now before they eat. We need that kind of help to understand. Now, as we move ahead, let's look at this old warhorse, because it's also a quick study. The senses, because that was a part of the formation of the priastic body, right? Now, the accents of this chart is on controlling the senses. Good luck with that, and I hope you can do it. But really, we're placing more of the emphasis on rebirth and reincarnation. So out of here you can see Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield, and the Purusha is basically Krishna. He has 2 Purushas. One is the life force by which everything happens, unseen, prana if you want to call it that, and the antakarana and so forth. But the other is my supreme abode, and it's actionless and formless. See, that's Brahman. So in the time then, because Samkhya was so much in the minds of people, we were calling it Purusha. The indweller in the city of 9 gates, if you want to describe that word, Purusha. So you have 9 gates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You see, 9 apertures, and these are all taking in food and giving off food, you see. I mean, if you want to make the connection again. And it's all done by energy, right? So the prana here, the reins of prana is that energy. And that's my lower nature, Krishna says, right? The life force by which everything is upheld. These reins of prana that are connected to the 5 senses, which then connect to the 5 elements. This is Yoga 101. I would not teach people Hatha Yoga, except in a few cases where it might be useful. I would teach them Yoga 101 would mean how to connect the quintuplication process again, and how to see how one came out of the other. One set of fives came out of the other, from the fivefold mind on down, and how they're direct correlations, because if you learned this, you'd know that Brahman wasn't involved. That would be the first important thing. You wouldn't blame God for the creation, or praise God for the creation. You could only maybe go to the Trinity and say, marvelous that what you do, but I think I want out now. See? I want to go beyond and be free of form. See? What about that? Because thousands of people have been doing that for ages, particularly in India, because it's actually a goal. See? We don't find it as a goal here. So I went through those kind of quickly, and I skipped ego, mind, and intelligence, but if we have to, we can just look back and see that that's three aspects of the Priyastika body, right? So Krishna's teaching is there. Now, before I go on, the whole thing is unmanifested Prakriti is lying behind. That's where I said it would be good to amend or add on to Sri Krishna's teachings this time, that he said, I have my lower nature, the Priyastika body, but I also have two Purushas, the lower Purusha and the higher Purusha. But I think we should add on a second Prakriti too. See? Because none of us in the West know about unmanifested Prakriti. If we did know about unmanifested Prakriti, we'd know about the word. And we'd know how the word contains seeds, just like forests and trees contain seeds. And then we'd know how everything got into manifestation through seeds. Not just on earth, because the baby comes from seeds. Sukra found that out. But everything else came from seeds too, right? Forests and fish and eggs, and everything is a seed. So unmanifested Prakriti, if you knew that everything came from seeds, again you'd shift the blame away from Brahman or devil and say, oh, I see, I watered those seeds, they're in me. See, they're in my mind. And then sankalpa and vikalpa and karma bandha and samskaras and mayak sankalpa and vivarta and false superimposition and ignorance was all my doing, you see. Salutations to myself. See, the Tantras say, salutations to my adorable self. Look at who I am, the great self. But, you could also say, salutations to the great fool. I was a great fool that I engaged in all this. And I became a greater fool by doing it hundreds and thousands of times in ignorance, because many people are born there. See, and do you think they know why they were born? Has anyone taught you about samskaras in the West? For thousands of years has it been taught? Do you know about false superimposition, that any form, anytime you see a form, it's covering your true nature? Any form. Thought is a form, so that's covering your true nature. Do you know about that the mind, the cosmic mind, is also engaged and guilty of spewing forth worlds that are coverings over the formless Brahman? So, to be born at the lowest rung of the ladder, it's number one, not necessary, and number two, very undesirable. Number three, it's very painful, and that's where the ocean of suffering idea comes from. And that's why we look around the world and see so many people suffering under the thumb of everyone from so-called religious people to violent military souls and other demons, you see, that inhabit this world in form. And you can't pretend that away, not with the media anymore on the scene. So, with what certitude of its own intelligence, by belief in its own separate existence, and by thought of all the dualities in it, it projects, and then it sustains and produces, you see. So life force, expulsion, assimilation, aspiration, and pervasion are the 5 kinds of pranas. See, if you want to put it in easy to understand terms really quickly, it evacuates your waste. It causes your breath. That's prana. Most people think of prana as that. In breath, out breath, held breath, which is a great teaching, by the way, to also take another little avenue with. It moves nutrients through your bloodstream. There's a form of it which is stationary, that simulates Brahman. If Brahman is stationary, there's a prana that's also stationary. It doesn't move. So it's like ether holding elements, you see, or planets. So there's a prana that's very stationary like that. And then there's udana, there's a prana that takes your thoughts up. That's what the yogis like. They like to get a hold of that prana and get blissful, you see. They like to get back to the bliss of Brahman via purified thoughts. Chit shuddhi, you see. So they're going to want to purify this mind and make it non-dual. On the other side you have the 5 subtle elements. Now we went down this trajectory, another kind of down and out pass that you're being thrown. Hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, and smelling, the 5 senses of knowledge, each turn into manifest their equivalent, you see, on a gross sense. No big thing, smelling and earth go together, and that goes together with evacuation, you see. And tasting and water go together, because you need water on your tongue to taste food and digest and so forth. Seeing definitely goes together with fire, that's an easy one. And feeling with air, touch, and hearing with ether. We could add in here the 5 gross senses, which are some of them I just mentioned. But don't forget the tanmatras, which we've forgotten. We don't know much about prana, and we don't know much about tanmatras, nor do we know much about unmanifested prakriti, which is all of this in a seed form, in our mind. Can't be any clearer than that. All of this out here, that's nature, has a seed form that's invisible, that's all in your mind. And if you want to be more clear, it's in your deep sleep state. And you water it when you come out with any of these manuals. If you get, oh, does it come with a manual, Lord? You're talking to Lord Brahma or Lord Vishnu. Does all of this come with a manual? Yeah, well, a couple of my sons put out a couple manuals. Here's the 8-limbed yoga, and here's the tantra, and here, take it with you, and read it on your way out. You see, make sure you read it before you close the door, so you can ask me any questions about it. So there are explanations for all this. So in these explanations, you might overlook, or it might not be present in some systems, that there was something called the 5 subtle elements. And that was what gave rise to the 5 gross elements. So audibility is hearing, isn't it? And that gives rise to ether. And tangibility is feeling. Something's tangible, and that gives rise to air. Visibility is seeing, and that gives rise to fire. Flavor is tasting, that gives rise to water. Fragrance is smelling, that gives rise to earth. These are connections, 15 of them. 3 sets of 5, they're tattvas. This is how the purastika body and how the cosmic mind put all this together. It's eternal. This is Adi Vidya Daiva, Krishna calls it in the Gita. Adi, original, Vidya, knowledge, Daiva, divine. It's the original divine knowledge. And Sanskrit is here with us, the language of the gods, to give us an eternal version of it in words that we have no equivalents for in English, in philosophies that we have no thought of in the West. And we're not coming forward and taking this on. Give it to me, you see. Give me this new version, because I'm sick and tired of creation of the worlds out of nothing. I'm sick and tired of man being a sinner. I'm sick and tired of somebody telling me that there's a God up in the sky on a cloud with a beard. I'm sick and tired of somebody inventing a devil underneath me. All of these are superstitions at best. And Swami Vivekananda has come here to destroy them. Right here to our own country, to destroy them. It calls it irreligion. There's some good things in religion. There's good things in dualism and qualified non-dualism. I mean, this is all basically qualified non-dualism. It's not I and my Father are one yet, but how are you going to get to I and my Father are one without making these connections that have been forgotten for ages and that haven't been given to you by your parents for hundreds of lifetimes, European lifetimes, you see. If you're following the track that I was always European, you see. And as far as, earth and excretion, you're always peeing, you see. You're taking a European vacation, like my sister will do next month, you see. You're a peeing. and there's a power of prana and a subtle element that causes you to do that on the physical level. Thank God for it, you see. But keep the channel pure, and because Kundalini Shakti would love to sport through all of these mechanisms if you keep it pure, it means you can live a divine life, and you can have an eternal life. You can have bliss, not happiness mixed with sorrow, which is what the mind is holding for you if you don't keep this pure. So I think I went through that in a whirlwind, but I pointed out the important factors of prana, tanmatras, which Swamiji said in his Raja Yoga. Sorry, I found out in the West you don't have these in your philosophies. And unmanifested prakriti is missing. Those are so important so that we quit creating a false God or blaming God for everything that happens. They're the answer to the question about why has God done this to me when he hasn't, when he isn't even a he. Why is God on one side of the war and not on the other? Why does evil champion over good, half the time at least, if not more? Because the devil is in you. God is in you. The projection power is in you. You've done all of this. It's your doing. And you're suffering the karmas and being born in the karmas as a result. So take yourself to task. Purify the mechanisms. Find your true nature and be free. Take what's outside, what's inside, render them into one state, meditate on that state, pass your time contentedly and be free. That's how Shankara put it. In the Viveka Chudamani, Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravila Payansan, Sanmatram Anandaganam, Vibhavayam. Why? Because I'm Anandaganam. I'm a mass of indeterminable, indivisible bliss. But am I going to be a bullock, going to the marketplace with sweets on my back, hauling them but never tasting them? Thou art that, and you're never going to know that? You're going to have to be happy with a bunch of lifetimes of sometimes suffering, sometimes pleasure, sometimes rich, sometimes poor, sometimes happy, sometimes depressed. How could you fall into that predicament, you see? How could you accept that? False gold, see? And not say the true value of the gold within you, not fool's gold. I think yes, the quotes. So I said great yogic connections. This is a teaching that comes out of, again, Krishna's teachings. But if you looked at it in terms of Patanjali's yoga, he would say this: by meditating upon the elements, the senses, and the mind, The hidden truth about objects gets revealed. Meditation upon the subtle elements and the sense of I-ness expands thought, awakens wisdom, and tames the ego. If you're working in the purification processes with these great manuals. Then meditation upon the true individual, that is not your ego but your Atman, along with its intelligence, delimits the ego and exposes the fount of joy within you. And that's why you saw them in ecstasy, you see. Like Sri Ramakrishna in this day and age. The Purusha then transcends the very idea of selfhood, right? Because it's the belief in its own separate existence. It transcends the idea of the ego. And meditates on the awareness of cessation. Now, no doubt, Patanjali is sounding like Buddha there, who lived probably 700-800 years before him. Is yoga smacks sometimes of Buddhism, of Lord Buddha's teachings, that is. And the Indian Lord Buddha, the early Buddha, the first original. So he says, at that point you have the ability to meditate on the awareness of cessation, because after the ego goes, what's there left, you see? Everything goes into a formless light. And you're witnessing this light. That's called witness consciousness. So in the same way you could look and witness your births and your deaths back on earth, you see. And you have divine memory, smriti, right, inside of you. That's why sometimes we'll sing about that to the goddess. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Chetaneti Abhidiyate Namastasyai, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Vishnu Rupena Samstita Namastasyai, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Samstita Namastasyai, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Om. It's out of the Divine Mother Scriptures, Chandi. O Mother, you exist as memory in all living beings. O Divine Mother of the Universe, you exist as intelligence in all living beings. And on. This could go, and does go, for many months, 700 some mantras. So basically you can see how Kundalini loves to sport through the Purustic body in that way. All the seers of different ages are saying the same thing, and they're aware of Chit Shakti. He would call it Chit Shakti, the power of thought, the power in words, and he'd call it Kundalini Shakti and so forth. And they're talking about this subtle presence of Divine Mother power in every word, in every letter. Just like atoms have subatomic particles and so forth, letters have wisdom particles in them. That's why alphabets are so powerful, and languages guide the world. And become mantras and higher teachings like scriptures, if we keep them up, if we realize her in all words, if we become a student of the word, you see, a faithful student of the word, and seek for higher meaning or deeper meaning. Then do the samadhis of knowledge, bliss, and I-ness lead to formlessness. Maybe a little bit disjointed there because I didn't read the whole quote, but it is very loaded, as Yoga Sutras are. I've often said that other than Tantra, which was never systematized, nobody ever said, I'm the father of Tantra, forget it. It's too vast, too ancient. But in yoga, he systematized this into 8 limbs. that had happened over Vasishta's yoga thousands of years before and forward, put it into this wonderful system called Ashtanga, eight-limbed, or Raja Yoga, kingly yoga, and therefore did systematize this system of yoga. And since he did that, there's been 20, 25 very important commentators in India that all put their mark on it and made comments about his sutras, yoga sutras. So powerful, but other than Tantra, it's the most complicated of all the systems in India. Complicated in a good way. It has so much deep teaching. So let's end with, because we made our way through actually 4 charts today. We took so much time on this one, but it was the ground, as you can see. We came back to it a lot. So here's a quote to end. Meditating with intense focus upon the principles of existence. Remember what they are. Fourfold mind, pranas, tanmatras, the 5 senses. These are called tattvas. Meditating with intense focus on these principles of existence, the seeker defragments the mind and unifies himself with nature. Unification here is not one of identity, but one of connection. That is, oneness with nature would mean his soul is one with birth, decay, and death, and this is not the case. The soul is eternal existence. Thus, realizing that all of nature has come out of his mental process via the power of projection, sankalpa, the yogi takes stock of the evolutes of nature from gross to subtle, contemplates them and masters them. In this way, he separates the true self from the apparent self and from all of nature. And in yoga, that's called Kaivalya. Yeah. It means freedom from form. So you can see again that India has, unique in all the traditions, has this high goal, paragatam Buddha called it, of freedom from form, or liberation, or moksha, or mukti. Kaivalya would be Father of Yoga's way of saying that that's the penultimate state before immersion happens. It'd be like, as the hailstone fell toward the ocean, it looked at the clouds and said, I'm not that. You see, it looked at the sun and said, I'm not that. And as it fell, it became one. So its Kaivalya state is right there, when it realized it's nothing but the self. It's not the form of the sun, it's not the form of clouds, it's not the form of waves. It is the ocean. So that would be metaphorically a way of speaking that Kaivalya is the penultimate stage in yoga, and there are 7 steps towards it. We would then go to the next chart called the 7 steps of Kaivalya to see how the yogi arrives there. But this process is more alambanic. In other words, you take each of these things and you make them obviously something to meditate on. So if you laughed, as many of us did in the early days, about the cartoon of the yogi sitting there watching a flower bloom, you see, and it became a big joke, you see. And then pretty soon you have the 2 cows sitting by the side of the road. One's a guru cow, and one's a student cow. And the guru cow is saying, as you walk along the road of life, make sure and eat the roses. You see. So it's not smell the roses in that case. So you have this idea of the yogi sitting there meditating upon a flower blooming. Don't laugh, because he's not just watching the beauty of nature unfold, you see, and getting trapped in that. Like, oh, look at the beautiful trees, or look at the beautiful sunset and all that. He's going right to the source of things by using this as a source for meditation so that he can take it back to its previous origin, and that origin back to its origin, or from effect to cause, and from cause and effect back to its last cause. And that's been the way of Utpatti, or origins, since Yoga Vasishta's time. Lord Vasishta has taught about origins. It takes up a whole section of his Yoga Vasishta scripture. That prakarana, it's called, is called Utpatti, all about origins. And that's going to bring you into recognition again of seeds. The unmanifested Prakriti is a way of saying that, in part English anyway, that there's a manifested nature, but it all came out of the mind's ability in unmanifested Prakriti to have seeds to produce these things and then go play with them. If you sport in the fields of the Lord or do Atmik Sankalpa, you're fine. So you don't let go of the pole when you spin around. However, many souls have not learned that art and then falling into Maya, like even Sukra did. So, this has been the presentation of the first class on reincarnation and rebirth, taking a standpoint a little bit differently than talking about like the chart I would usually use, the rebirth chart that Holy Mother gave us and all the teachings of rebirth. Next week I'll take another trajectory that's very close to that with the gunas. I found a very beautiful image for Shankar's three gunas chart, which has to do with the fencing with three other fencers. So now you have the three gunas that you have to fence with. And he shows you how to do it. So how rebirth and reincarnation happens via the gunas will be kind of the way we'll look at it next week. Another teaching that's explicitly a part of the Vedanta fold. You don't find it in any other religion or any other tradition unless it was borrowed. So that's basically tamas, rajas, and sattva. Or why you're depressed, why you're too restless, or why aren't you more balanced all the time. Om Bhadram Karnabhihi Srinuyama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshibhirya Jatraha Sthiraya Rangaishtushtuvansas Tanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swasti na Indra Vrida Shravaha Swasti na Hapusha Vishwadevaha Swasti nastarksho arishtanemi Swasti no brihaspatir dadatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother of the universe, with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.